So first party data is, I would say, been a pretty big focus of a lot of our brands for, a handful of years now. But we're managing a bit of a transition in terms of how we think about first party data. So historically, we've leveraged pixel based data for a lot of, lookalike audience modeling on various campaigns, on various platforms. And that served us well, but with some of the changes in identity and the complexity around cookies and all the rest, we are, um, uh, working with brands to leverage first party data in a more direct basis, i.e., using various customer data platforms and other ways of onboarding CRM data, and leveraging that data for campaign targeting.
So targeting and also understanding performance, I suppose, like what's the sort of the value of using the first party data?
Sure. So performance for sure. So we leverage first party data in two ways. So one is from a targeting perspective. How do we take customer data? We work with e-commerce brands, and those e-commerce brands have an immense amount of valuable customer data. And ideally, we are working with those brands to build what I like to call, value-based customer segments. And so leveraging those customer segments to build lookalike models based off of, the highest value customers, mid-tier customers, et cetera. We also certainly use first party data from an attribution perspective, and that really kind of works its way out in two different ways. One is platform-based attribution, right? So utilizing, particularly in the CTV space, programmatic platforms like Roku to understand the attribution or relationship between someone saw an ad on a Roku device and someone converted via desktop or mobile. We also spent a lot of time working with brands on, GeoX experiments as well, where obviously we're using first party data in that context to understand, if we target people in a specific market and we increase the media weight for a given channel, CTV is a common one where we're testing this. Does that result in a lift in their business relative to control markets?
So big opportunity for brands in the CTV space, and brands that are able to kind of play in that space where maybe they didn't in programming in linear or the broadcast networks, the cable nets. How do you see the opportunities in CTV for your brands, and how are you kind of guiding them through that?
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, a lot of our brands are still, in the way that we guide brands from a media investment perspective, is to think about the relationship that CTV plays from a reach perspective in terms of how do we still put our ads in front of their target consumer. And so the general, I guess, dynamics within CTV is that it's typically a younger audience that is spending less time on linear TV. And so from a classic planning perspective, we spend a lot of time working with brands on, increasing their CTV budgets relative to consumer consumption trends and, still maintaining effective reach against, younger demos within that environment. Increasingly, however, though, I would say one of the things that we're observing and we're leaning into with a lot of brands is the interest to, lean more heavily into the CTV space overall, given some of the, potential value that it offers that linear, that is differentiated from linear in the sense that you can be a bit more targeted. There are some different options with regard to the use of first party data and measurement and so on and so forth. And so in some cases, depending on the objectives of the brand and what we're trying to accomplish, that can be more attractive.
What do you think about, the issue of context, content, adjacencies, kind of the old-fashioned notion of context, but in sort of this newer world? What is the value of context, and also as a part of that, what about the creative experience of advertising of the creative itself? Outside of targeting, what about creativity and context? I'm sure you guys think a lot about those things.
Yeah, so that one is that's an interesting question. So the context, I think, is still really important and really valuable. But there are, I suppose, two schools of thought on this. So one is, from a classic sort of digital or programmatic perspective, the idea of targeting very specific audiences is that, you can maybe spend a little bit less time thinking about context or specific content, because in, I guess, classic sort of media buying or media planning perspective, part of thinking about context was the relationship between that context or that content and the audience that it brought. But if you're targeting, that audience directly, maybe you can spend a little bit less emphasis on context or content. That being said, I would say one of the challenges that we've been very focused on and addressing within the CTV marketplace as a whole is having a high degree of transparency and visibility in terms of placement and in delivery when it comes to content. And that is, I would say, one of the distinct challenges within the ecosystem today, in the sense that it's not always easy to get 100% transparency on at the show level, where all of your media is running. And I think that's one of the things that from an industry perspective, is important to address.
Jared, and finally, what do you see as sort of exciting trends ahead for 2022 in your space, particularly as it relates to CTV, kind of where things go in terms of investment, in terms of the role that the platforms need to play, the expectations of your clients? Where do you sort of see things moving? Where do you hope they move?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the not very profound answer to that is that we continue to see or expect to see increased investment in CTV overall. And I think that that's going to be driven by a couple of the concepts that you touched on. So one being, the ability to leverage first-party data in more valuable or more unique ways, and I think also the reality of that's where consumers are spending more and more of their time. And so, I think what we're focused on from an agency perspective and with working with our brands is how do we, what's the smartest way to approach that marketplace? How do we best leverage the different technologies and platforms out there in order to, get the best possible bottom line result?